go. Good to see you. My wristwatch thought when I called SHEILA that I was calling SIRI. So that's why it was responding there. Good to see you. We're going to begin our class with some prayers that Sheila, who's the host today, is going to put up for us. There we go. So you can say you already know these prayers, so probably after some time we wouldn't have to put them on, but it's good to have them on for if someone's new. So, Sangye Churang Soke Chognam La, Jangchu Badu Dagni Kapsuchi, Dagi Chunen Gipe Sognam Ki, Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Sho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, like today, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrators. Sangye Chorang Soke Chognam La, Jangchu Badu Dagni Kapsuchi, Dagi Chunin Gipe Sognam Ki, Drola Penche Sangye Drupasho. So during the teaching yesterday, the day before yesterday, the Dalai Lama is giving in Ladakh. Laktor, the translator, was translating when the Dalai Lama led that prayer. And of course, generally when you say, sometimes we say, due to the merits I create by the practice of generosity and so forth, talking about the 6 perfections. But when you're listening to the teachings, we add that line, we change that line to say, due to the collections I create by listening to the Dharma. Okay, so now a short mandala offering. So what you do, the mindset here is to think you're offering the whole universe. So you can start with just the present solar system we have. So that we have kind of like the axis of the solar system, like Mount Meru, although there may be something more substantial than that. The sun and the moon are our celestial counterparts here, the star that we call the sun, and the continents have various interpretations. It can mean some of the planets, like the Zambuling, where the blue sky can be like Earth, and maybe Mars is like the Western continent with a red sky, or it can mean, as in classical Vedic idea, that there are different continents on this Earth. But at any rate, you imagine all of this purified and all of the things within it, all of the enjoyments, all of the things you might crave for, offering to the omniscient mind. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. And then if you just move up a little bit, there you go. O holy and perfect, pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the sky, the skies or sky of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release or send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ranamandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to do a little meditation. Actual sort of solidifying the meaning of those prayers. So sit comfortably, relax your body, get your legs in position if you need to, relax your mind, recognize your breathing. Once it's recognized, hold it with a mental factor, mindfulness, as we were reminded last class, is not an omnipresent mental factor, but one of the object ascertaining mental factors. recognize that you're breathing in, whether you're breathing out, and recognize whether the breathing is a long breath or a short breath, as is exemplified in the teachings we had recently about the 4 close placements of mindfulness. When the Buddha taught them, he mentioned that in particular. Let go of all other thoughts. Just keep once you've recognized the breathing, just keep it in mind. So discriminating between an inhalation and an exhalation, there's some wisdom component here so that you don't become just numb, just watching the fact that you're breathing. A little more discrimination, recognizing whether it's a long breath or a short breath. And even further, watching the endpoints when the direction changes. One point here is not to be clever and think that you're multitasking, like this is something you can do in the background. This should be the only thing your mental consciousness is doing. Then with the mind a little bit calmed, bring your attention now to the mental consciousness, not to your eye, ear, nose, tongue, or body consciousness, which is itself very subtle, but not what we call subtle mind. It's subtle. It can't be observed immediately without sort of recognizing some signs that point us to it, such as the contents of the mind. So you notice the contents, the thoughts, recognize that they have some duration, and wait for a gap between the thoughts and focus on that spaciousness, or even when the thoughts are present, consciously recognizing that thoughts could not be present unless the mind had the conventional clear light nature, a lack of any obstruction. You take your attention away from the objective thought, place it on the subjective mind, the quality of the subjective mind that's perceiving it. fact that we alternate generally between negative states of mind and positive states of mind, like patience, love, compassion, and so forth, indicates that this clarity of the mind, this clear light nature of the mind, allows us to develop good qualities. There's nothing that is hindering us from changing, becoming better, overcoming our faults. In fact, we can develop all of the good qualities and become supremely blissful, fearless. This is also called the developmental Buddha nature. The fact that we, through its development, sort of replacing bad states of mind with positive states of mind, we can become a Buddha. The fact that we can be inspired that way right now is due to the fact that we have a life of leisure and endowment that the Buddha referred to in the sutras as an auspicious moment. So rare in the past. We've been born usually in the lower realms. Even when we were born as a human, we may have been born at a time when the Dharma hadn't been taught in the world. We would only have knowledge of it through our karmic imprints of it, which most of the time we didn't have. Right now, we're born with our senses intact in a religious country where there's freedom to practice, where the teachings of the Buddha have been given and still are being practiced. There are community of like-minded friends, like our Sangha, that we are a member of. We have a certain amount of faith, if not hope, at least hope, that our practice will bring about our transformation. And we're left to recognize that to simply spend this life on accumulating the 8 worldly concerns, to, let's say, the positive ones, accumulating, wealth and pleasure, love and respect, and so forth. Although they are the main aims of most sentient beings, they pale in comparison to Dharma goals, because all of those goals for this lifetime will be lost at the time of death. There's nothing enduring about them. And generally, in pursuing them, we create negative karma. But by pursuing the goal of liberation or enlightenment, developing the 6 perfections preceded by renunciation, wisdom of emptiness, and bodhicitta, great compassion, and so forth, we can find a great meaning to this lifetime that's enduring. We can create the cause for future human rebirths. Why we would go beyond seeking liberation for ourselves is because all living beings are in exactly the same situation as we are. They want to be happy. They want to be free of suffering. Most sentient beings have no refuge protector. Maybe they go to college, maybe they listen to seminars on the web about how to succeed in business, or they go to Trump University to become a real estate titan. All of that's, from the Buddhist perspective, all of that's useless. Seeking gratification from just the appearance of this lifetime. All living beings are in exactly the same situation with us. having the potential to become Buddha, but being distracted by the appearances of this life in order to lead them out of suffering, all of them who have been our mothers numberless times in the past and have been depthlessly kind, even when they've been strangers and friends. In order to benefit them, we have to become ourself enlightened, to know the paths to lead them on. To do that, we need to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom that are the causes of a Buddha's bodies and the Buddha mind, the omniscient mind. In order to do that, we need to know the methods to accumulate those collections, which are explained in Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka, sort of like our root text, and commented on by Lama Khapa in his Illumination of the Intent, Gompa Rapsel. So think the reason I'm participating today is to listen, hear, and meditate on the material being given in order to accumulate merit and wisdom for the sake of becoming a Buddha eventually, so that I can not only find my own supreme aim of Dharmakaya wisdom and bliss, everlasting bliss, but so that I can fundamentally, continually work for the benefit of sentient beings, taking them out of suffering, leading them into that same everlasting state of enlightenment. I'm going to participate in order to become a Buddha, so that I can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead sentient beings into everlasting blissful happiness. So with that mindset as a motivation, whatever we listen to is kind of filtered through that. How can I make use of this information to overcome my faults, to develop good qualities so that I can benefit others? I can begin by not harming them because I'm no longer as angry as I used to be, not as acquisitive and needy as I used to be. So I have time to spend to help sentient beings. Okay, and bring your attention back to the present. Good to see you. Hi, those who've just come, John and Snehi, good to see you. Richard, Don. So, okay. So, just to, I'll mention again at the end, I have a doctor's appointment on Monday, so there won't be, we won't have our usual discussion group then, but I'll mention that again in case you forget. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, is in Leh Ladakh right now, and he gave some teachings on the 37 practices. You can see that up on YouTube. We lost internet connection the other day when it was going on, but during the night they must have taken their footage that they still had on the tapes or the hard drives of their cameras, and they edited out unneeded sections, and that's been put up there on the web if you want to go to YouTube. His Holiness Leh Ladakh 2023. So you can see that. And tonight he will offer the Avalokiteshvara empowerment. If any of you have friends, most of you would have had that by now, but if you have friends that are interested, you could tell them here's an opportunity. Okay, so any questions, comments? Dharma itches you need scratched before we begin. Diana, how are you? You have any? Diana, Weddingen, you have anything?
No questions right now, Venerable George.
Okay. Anyone?
I had something.
Oh yeah. Okay.
In the meditation part, you were made a comment about not multitasking, because I caught myself doing that.
Good, good, good.
But I was wondering, because I thought you had said that the mind can only stay on one object at a time. So I was wondering how I was maintaining this continuity of following the breath, but at the same time thinking of other things.
Well, the mind does have some flexibility. Say, for instance, when you're watching the ballet or the sports cast, your team, and you're not totally concentrated on that. And your wife says, "Sean, do you want some Cheetos or some?" You can say, you notice, you hear that, and oh, no, I'm watching this. So we do have some flexibility. When your mind is totally concentrated on something, you can be inattentive of other things that are happening around you. That's what we call inattentive perception, a consciousness to which an object appears but is not apprehended, because your mental consciousness, let's say, is concentrating on the football game or the ballet or the concert or something, or the Dalai Lama's teaching. But you can do two things. You can watch and hear at the same time. You can pay attention to what His Holiness is doing, and you can listen to his words at the same time. So the mind can keep several things in mind, but when it's really concentrated, it just keeps one thing in mind, and all the other things that might usually be there begin to subside. That can lead you to developing tranquil abiding, calm abiding, right? Okay. So Diana Abramo, you have a thought question.
I don't know whether this is of use, but in modern cognitive science,
Okay.
this is to Sean's question, using functional MRI, which shows at the level of the millisecond which parts of the brain are metabolizing most rapidly. What we perceive as paying attention to two or more things is actually very rapid shifting, but rapid shifting within a small window within which the thought is maintained or the perception is maintained.
I
But
wondered if that was what was happening.
we do not do it effectively. Nobody does it effectively. And like in terms of people texting and driving, they've actually found it takes 20 seconds for people to really get attention back on the road, which is a very long time on the road.
Okay.
So I don't know if that maps to what we're speaking about, but that's the answer to the perceived thing that we're thinking about several things at once.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. So, okay. So we're going to continue on. We're in the section on the fifth ground, which is called difficult to overcome or hard to conquer, reading from Thupten Jinpa's book. So I'm going to go back a little bit, but where we are right now, for those who lost your place, in Jinpa's book, we're on page 152. In Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of this section on page 228. So earlier, where was it here? We talked about the meeting of the Father and Son Sutra. That's just maybe a page before this. This is the section that's in Jinpa's book, says the 10 Ground Sutra, the sutra on the 10 bhumis, or Dashi Bhumika, says that the fifth ground bodhisattva comes to be versed in the Four Noble Truths of suffering, origination, cessation, and path, And separately, it also says that he comes to be versed in the conventional and the ultimate truths. This raises the question of how there can be fourth truths distinct from the two truths. So what I wanted to mention here is that this section in the Dashi Bhumika, the Ten Bhumi Sutra. Let me see here. Where is it here? 60 stanzas, final exposition. Oh, here we go. So there are various translations of the Dashi Bhumika because it's part of a larger sutra. And like on the 84,000 website, you can get a translation of that. And this section is excerpted in various places. Lama Chandrakirti himself, in the auto commentary at this point, he actually mentions this quotation from the Dashi Bhumika. So I've got several translations of it here, but I'll just read one of them. In the quotation says, so in the Madhyamaka it says, further, so this is Chandrakirti's words, which are not all quoted by Lama Tsongkhapa, right? Lama Tsongkhapa is selective. Sometimes he expands upon what Chandrakirti said. Sometimes he leaves out some things as though you already should know it. So this is a quotation from Chandrakirti. Further, if asked, what other truths exist that are different than the four truths? So there's more than four truths. I shall explain. There exists, as was taught in the fifth bodhisattva ground in the Dashi Bhumika. So this is Chandrakirti saying that, okay? So he's quoting the 10 grounds. It says, this is suffering. The Arya truth is thoroughly known just as it is. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path which progresses to the cessation of suffering, the Arya truth. Those are thoroughly known just as they are. And then on the fifth ground in the Dashi Bhumika, the Buddha continues. He says, the fifth grounder is skilled in conventional truth, skilled in ultimate truth, skilled in the truth of characteristics, skilled in the truth of divisions, skilled in the truth which, having differentiated, makes realizations, skilled in the truth of properties or substance, skilled in the truth of strong production, skilled in the truth which knows exhaustion and non-generation, skilled in the truth engaging, that knows the paths, and skilled in the truths from achieving the connection, or what do you say, the transition between the sequences of the bodhisattva grounds until the exalted wisdom of the Tathagata arises. So there are 10 truths that are mentioned. So it's very difficult to know, just reading that from Chandrakirti, or just reading it from the Dashi Bhumika, what those are referring to. So in this context, there are two great commentaries to the Dashi Bhumika, one of them by Vasubandhu, the other one by Surya something or other. Do you remember, Paul, what the other main commentary?
No, I don't remember.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay. So when I mentioned before, when we had a translators conference in Sarnath some years ago, and the Dalai Lama was invited, it was the first one that Robert Thurman had called And it was the genesis of this 84,000 project that one of the Khyentse Rinpoches started, translating these texts. The Dalai Lama said, before you translate the sutras, you should translate the commentaries, the shastras. So like in this case, before translating the Dashi Bhumika, you should translate the commentaries to that, that the great pundits closer to the time of the Buddha. They weren't, the people who wrote the shastras generally were not living during the time of the Buddha. They came the centuries afterwards, but way closer to his time when the oral tradition of understanding those sutras was well understood. So in this case, those 10 truths are talking about various things. They're talking about conventional truth, ultimate truth. 4 of them are talking about the 4 noble truths. For instance, he is skilled in the truth of properties, actually refers to the truth of suffering, skilled in the truth of strong production. Maybe some of you recognize that terminology when we talk about the origin of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering. We say that it is strong production. Skilled in the truth which knows exhaustion and non-generation of delusions once they're ceased. It's talking about the truth of cessation, and the skill in the truth of engaging the knower of paths that knows paths is talking about the truth of the path. So there are other truths that are mentioned other than even the 4 truths, but all of them can be included in the 2 truths. That was the point here. The 5th ground bodhisattva comes to be versed in the 4 noble truths of suffering and so forth. It says that he also comes to be versed in the conventional and ultimate truths. This raises the question of how the 4 truths, of how there can be 4 truths distinct from the 2 truths. So here, even beyond the 4 truths, the Dashi Bhumika talks about 10 truths, but all of them are included in either conventional or ultimate truths. And then it says, how can that be? Because the meeting of the Father and Son Sutra, which we talked about before, remember when Shakyamuni Buddha, who was the son of his father, right? He was the son who came back to meet his father, the king. So in that sutra, it says, and as well as Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, it mentions that the truths are exhausted within the 2 truths. So in this context, I just wanted to, do I have that here? Okay. I did have it before, but I don't have it right here. So that's something that we talked about before. There is a famous quotation from the meeting of the Father and Son Sutra, where the Buddha explains that there are no other truths, and that's one of the important sources for that. Oh, I remember I mentioned that last time also, that in the meeting of the Father and Son Sutra, although there's not a translation of the whole sutra in English right now, there are many, many stanzas of it that are very important for the Madhyamaka. For instance, this point about the number of truths. So we talked about that, and then there was a question. Chandrakirti's commentary confirms that there is no truth not encompassed within the 2 truths. So these 10 truths, the 4 truths, were taught to demonstrate what is to be relinquished, such as the contaminated phenomena of the 108 phenomena from form to omniscient mind. A certain portion of them are called the afflicted phenomena, and what is to be affirmed, the class of purified or enlightened phenomena, that includes the path of the cause, the truth of cessation, which is the effect. Of these, the commentary states that the truths of suffering, origination, and the path, those three belong to conventional truth, while the truth of cessation belongs to the ultimate truth. So that's where we got to last time. Okay. So in his commentary to the 60 stanzas of reasoning, also, so Chandrakirti explains. So Chandrakirti wrote a commentary to the 60 stanzas of reasoning. Who wrote the 60 stanzas? Does anyone know? John, do you know?
That's Nagarjuna.
Nagarjuna, right? And just the karikas, difficult to understand. So Chandrakirti wrote, as he was a fan of Nagarjuna, he wrote a commentary to that. Big fan, right? So Chandrakirti explains nirvana to be ultimate truth and the other three truths to be conventional truths. And he also explained that nirvana in this context refers to the truth of cessation. So yeah, I wanted to mention something about that here. Where are we? Those are the truths. There we go. So the 60 stanzas. Here are some quotes from that. There's a non-Buddhist, or let's say a Buddhist who's not a prasangika, what we could call realist, or someone who is propounding that phenomena really exist the way that they appear. They say, is even nirvana a conventional truth? And the Buddha respond, it is so. Nirvana is a conventional truth. If samsara is a construction, if samsara is a construction, nirvana is also a construction because they both exist as mundane expressions. So this is talking about considering nirvana as a conventional truth. Even emptiness has a conventional aspect, right? All phenomena consist of being a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. The basis of that is a conventional truth, and its ultimate nature is an ultimate truth. So I'm going to read a little bit more. Thus, it was proclaimed in the Prajnaparamita, the mother of the Buddhas. Shariputra said, he was talking to Subhuti, Venerable Subhuti, do you claim that even nirvana is like an illusion, like a dream? And Subhuti replied, Shariputra, even if there were a truth that surpasses nirvana, I would say of it, this too is like an illusion. That is to say, talking about phenomena that we conceptualize, what we're thinking about is the conventional aspect of those things. Even nirvana has a conventional aspect, but we think of, being free of all of the delusions and so forth and so on. If that is so, the Buddhist realist might object, how do you explain the pronouncements by the Buddha such that nirvana is the ultimate truth? So we're going back and forth. There's unclarity in this discussion. Although phenomena can be said to be conventional truths, they all have an ultimate aspect to them. So nirvana itself is an ultimate truth. My explanation is that it is called ultimate truth by worldly convention because its nature is non-deceptive with respect to the world. Anything created is deceptive and not an ultimate truth. Hence, the other three noble truths are presented as conventional truths, since a characteristic of created things is to deceive the childish or the naive by appearing to exist intrinsically. Otherwise, why would Lord Buddha have pronounced, "O monks, O bhikshus"? Nirvana is non-deceptive in nature. It is the sole supreme truth. So I'm not sure if that's become more clear or becomes more confused. Here, when we talk about nirvana, the actual state of nirvana is said to be the meditative equipoise, which is realizing emptiness directly, within which all of the afflictions have been extinguished or ceased, right? It's not as though one can experience nirvana other than in that meditative equipoise. So let me read further what Jimpa has translated here. Furthermore, in this commentary to the 60 stanzas of reasoning that we're just quoting from that Chandrakirti wrote, Chandrakirti points out how the Buddha accepts the possibility of direct knowledge of the truth of cessation. Hopkins translated, he adds that the teacher Buddha asserted there is direct knowledge of true cessation. This is not feasible in the systems of the proponents of true existence. So what systems are there that are propounding true existence? Does anyone know? Shankar, what do you think?
I mean, you mean the Buddhist system or non-Buddhist? I mean, there's
Yeah. I'm talking about the Buddha, particularly the Buddhist systems.
I mean, the Vaibhasikars and the lower schools certainly, right? Yeah. But even the Chitta Matra have the mind basis of all, and the Swatantrika Prasangikas, not Prasangika, the Swatantrika Madhyamikas also have something that's intrinsically existent, right?
Yeah, but we're talking about true existence here, right?
Oh, I see. So
proponents of true existence. So that means
that would be the lowest one. What did I say? Vaibhasikas.
No, it would be everything below Madhyamaka, because the Madhyamakas in general say that phenomena do not truly exist. Of the Mahayana tenets, the other Mahayana tenet, Chittamatra, says that ordinary phenomena do not truly exist, but the mind truly exists. So they're kind of like halfway in between. The Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika say that all phenomena truly exist. So you have different gradations. Of the Hinayana, in general, the two systems say that all phenomena truly exist. The Chittamatra says that the mind truly exists, but other phenomena do not truly exist because the phenomena are mind only. And the Madhyamaka says all phenomena do not truly exist. Of the Madhyamaka, the Prasangika split off from the Svatantrika, and they say that something more subtle, we talk about true existence, we talk about something, the lack of inherent existence, the emptiness of inherent existence, which is more subtle than what the Svatantrika believe to be the lack of true existence. Do you remember this from our tenets? See, some people So I can see some people looking up like they're thinking, some people nodding. So you have to think about this from the, from the Svatantrika point of view. Phenomena do not truly exist, but there's something there still inherently existing. The basis upon which you're contemplating, it inherently exists. The Prasangika say, no, that's not possible. The real meaning of true existence is not that. True existence means that phenomena also lack inherent existence, that there's not one atom anywhere that exists from its own side. So Hopkins' translation said, he adds that the teacher Buddha asserted that there is direct knowledge of true cessations. This is not feasible in the system of the proponents of true existence. Okay, so that would be Chittamatra and below, who assert that a direct valid cognizer has as its object only exclusively characterized phenomena, or we say, what do we translate? Rangsen, self-characterized phenomena. So that means phenomena that are impermanent. You can only have a direct realization of that. So Jimpa's translation said, Buddha accepts the possibility of direct knowledge of the truth of cessation. You can actually perceive true cessation, and how this would be untenable, impossible for the Buddhist essentialists. That means the people who believe in true existence, and how this, who assert direct valid cognitions to possess as their objects, things endowed with intrinsic characteristics. Rangzengi. So I don't think that Jimpa has that exactly right. In his own tradition, in his own system, Chandrakirti establishes the understanding of how cessation is directly known in terms of the realization of suchness by the uncontaminated gnosis of meditative equipoise. What does that mean? In his own tradition, that means Prasangika explanation, not the Svatantrika, Chandrakirti says that how cessation is directly known is in the context of when you have a realization of emptiness, suchness, by the uncontaminated gnosis of meditative equipoise. So that means that cessation is something that's known by the direct realization of emptiness, right? It's not known, actual cessation is not something that's known otherwise. We say that cessation for the Prasangika is one of their kind of unique tenets. Cessation is an ultimate truth. For the lower tenets, cessation is a conventional truth. And the fact that cessation is an ultimate truth means that it can be only known by an ultimate mind. What's an ultimate mind? A mind that's realizing emptiness. So that doesn't mean that all emptinesses are cessations, are true cessations, but it means that all true cessations are emptinesses. I'm going to see if anyone's eyes are glazed over. Diana, do you? Oh no, Snehi, what do you think?
I got very confused, Venerable George, on this distinction between cessations being accepted as a conventional truth by some schools and only as an ultimate truth by Prasangika.
Right. So the commentary that I was reading before is kind of referring to that. The lower schools are saying that cessation is is something that you can realize with a conventional mind, whereas for Prasangika, cessation is only something that's realized by the mind that's realizing emptiness. So that's the mind that's realizing ultimate truth. So that's identifying cessation with the realization of emptiness. When would that take place? All realizations of emptiness are not necessarily realizations of cessation. Paul, what do you think? You're thinking about that. You're weighing that.
Say that one more time, please, Venerable George.
So the all realizations of cessations, true cessations, when we say cessations here, we're talking about true cessations, are realizations of emptiness. But all realizations of emptiness are not necessarily realizing true cessations.
Sure, because there would be emptinesses with regard to invalid bases, right? So, for example, a pink elephant does not exist in this room, right? Is the absence of that is an emptiness, but it's not a realization. Is that
That's not, I don't think that's the point here. That's the absence of an elephant in this room where I am right now in my loft. That's a permanent phenomena. That's
Sure.
an example of a non-affirming negation.
correct?
It just is that there's no elephant here. It doesn't tell you what is here. My microphone, my statues, my paraphernalia or whatever. But
Right.
that's not an emptiness.
Are they, oh,
Go on.
but is this getting at the fact that true cessation only happens, on the 8th stage for a bodhisattva, where you truly eliminate all afflictions? So you attained, no.
No, we have even on the path of seeing, when there's only a cessation of the intellectually formed delusions, afflictions, klesha, that is also a true cessation. There are true cessations on the path of meditation, the cessation of the gross delusions, and then later the small gross delusions, and then the gross medium delusions. All of those are true cessations.
But I thought nirvana meant like true cessation of everything. So from path of seeing to, the 8th stage of a bodhisattva,
Right.
I always thought there was cessation, but sort of in gradation, less and less and less and less till
Right.
till zero.
Right.
That to me,
You're right. That's using the word nirvana. So we're not at this paragraph. We're not talking about nirvana right here, right? In his own tradition, Chandrakirti establishes the understanding of how cessation is directly known in terms of the realization of suchness by the uncontaminated gnosis of meditative equipoise. A lot of words. So that uncontaminated gnosis means the uncontaminated exalted wisdom, right? The wisdom in that meditative equipoise on emptiness is uncontaminated by any conventional appearances and so forth, right? So when we talk about cessation, we're not talking about the total cessation of nirvana yet, although nirvana is a cessation, is a true cessation also. it is an ultimate truth. Here we're first of all just talking about all of the cessations along the line. When you have a true cessation, you only have a realization of that in meditative equipoise. So after the meditative equipoise, you arise from that, and you might think, I've realized emptiness previously, because when you were realizing emptiness, there's no thought, I am realizing emptiness, right? After that, when you arise from that in post-meditation, you have a memory that you realized emptiness, a recognition of that. You wouldn't have realized at that point what afflictions were ceased. The only time that you have a realization of cessation, that certain things are ceased, is in that meditative equipoise. Although you're not thinking that, you are realizing that, you have that wisdom that knows that they are ceased. Let me say again, in his own tradition, Prasangika, Chandrakirti establishes the understanding of how cessation is directly known in terms of the realization of suchness by the uncontaminated gnosis of meditative equipoise. That much makes sense? Okay. So, text continues, if cessation were conventional truth, such presentations would become utterly untenable. Let me see here, Jeffrey says, therefore, Jeffrey translates, if true cessations were conventional truths, his presentation would be impossible. So the statement here is that true cessations are ultimate truths. When do you realize ultimate truths? Only in the meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness, right? So what is called cessation by the world in the conventional sense, that things have been ceased, that's not the actual meaning of true cessation. True cessation is an ultimate truth. So this is I remember when we were studying with Geshe Zopa, there are a lot of doubts about this. From the Prasangika point of view, especially as Chandrakirti is explaining it, cessation is not a conventional phenomena that appears to be inherently existent, right? Conventional phenomena are phenomena that appear to be inherently existent, like the trees. Even when I think of Buddha, there is actual Buddha, and there is, which is an ultimate truth, let's say, and the conventional Buddha, which is what we think about. Like when we do our dedication, when we meditate on the emptiness of the three spheres, one of the things I mentioned is that the goals dedicated to my eventual achievement of enlightenment, let's say Buddhahood, that does not inherently exist. Buddhahood does not inherently exist. Buddha does not inherently exist. But when we think about it when we're not in meditative equipoise, the Buddha that we're thinking about is a conventional truth. It appears to our mind to be inherently existent. We think, oh yeah, that guy, the Buddha, or that girl. It appears to our mind as having some kind of findability. So if cessation is a ultimate truth, it can be only realized in meditative equipoise on emptiness. So it's at that point that the identification is made that true cessations are themselves emptinesses. but not all emptinesses are true cessations. True cessations are perceived during that meditative equipoise on emptiness, right? And so whatever is perceived in that meditative equipoise has to be existing the way that it appears. It has to be an ultimate truth. So emptinesses are ultimate truths. As I say, true cessations are ultimate truths. They are emptinesses, but not all emptinesses. There are other things that are perceived at that time. Emptiness in general, emptiness of the truth of suffering, emptiness of the truth of the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. Though, well, let's say leave off cessation. Those three other truths that are conventional truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the path, all of those are perceived also in that meditative equipoise, that they are empty of inherent existence. Those are emptinesses, but they are not, what you are perceiving is the emptiness of those, but those themselves are not true cessations. Let's say the emptiness of my iPad is an ultimate truth, right? The fact that the iPad does not exist inherently from its own side, but that is not a true cessation. The emptiness of the iPad can be realized in the meditative equipoise that realizes emptiness, right? It's realized, but that doesn't constitute a true cessation. But within that realization, there are one can realize the cessation of the phenomena, the cessation of the klesha. You realize that the klesha and their seeds are ceased in that meditative equipoise. That is called the true cessation. Let's see how this is doing. We're getting a little Snehi, what do you think?
So that was very clear and helpful, Venerable George. I am still puzzled about, the lower schools when they say cessation is a conventional truth. Like, what does that mean for them? Why are they making that assertion?
There's generally they say they have a different meaning of ultimate truth, right? First of all, for Prasangika, all phenomena are either conventional or ultimate truths. Ultimate truths are phenomena that exist the way that they appear. And the only thing that, for Prasangika, the only thing that is an ultimate truth is emptiness, because only emptiness appears the way that it exists. So for the lower tenets, they're taking a grosser meaning of ultimate truth. They're not taking that meaning of ultimate truth. For them, an ultimate exists the way that it appears because it is. Let's say, for some of the tenets, phenomena are said to be exist. They exist the way that they appear. That like when I look at a tree, that's said to be that can be an ultimate truth because the tree does exist the way that it appears. For Prasangika, it doesn't exist the way that it appears because it appears to be inherently existent, but it is actually empty of inherent existence. So it is not an ultimate truth. So when the lower tenets are talking about conventional truths, they can say that it is, when they're talking about nirvana, they can say nirvana is an ultimate truth because it does exist the way that it appears to be inherently existent. They wouldn't use it, well, let's say truly existent. They would say it truly exists like that. A lot of subtlety here. A lot of things, sort of like we're just putting on a primer coat. Let me just go a little bit further. So if cessation were conventional truth, such presentations would become utterly untenable. That is, the presentation that cessation is directly known while meditating on emptiness. That's when you have the knowledge of true cessations. If true cessations were conventional truths, they could not be realized in the meditative equipoise realizing emptiness, because all that appears at that point are ultimate truths, emptiness. Okay, you have to, maybe we'll have to go over this again later. So then it continues. Furthermore, Chandrakirti repeatedly endeavors to establish the necessity of direct realization of the truth of suchness when nirvana is actualized. So the terminology, Hopkins says, Chandrakirti also proves with great effort that when a nirvana is actualized, so now we're talking beyond cessation, Snehi. Remember, we were talking previously cessation. Now, when nirvana is actualized, what's the difference between true cessation and nirvana? Is nirvana a true cessation? Anyone? Aida? Aida?
That's a good question. I would say yes.
Yeah. So all nirvanas, let's say nirvanas of Shravakas or Pratika Buddhas, you can even talk about nirvanas of Bodhisattvas, all of them are true cessations. Are all true cessations nirvanas? Aida?
No, because if you have a true cessation, you still have not reached nirvana. There's still a process going on.
If you have lower true cessations, nirvana itself is a true cessation. So you can't say that if you have a true cessation, it is not nirvana. It can be the true cessation of nirvana in which everything is ceased, or it can be something before that, when you have some true cessations, but you have not yet achieved nirvana. Nirvana refers to the final state when all of the klesha and their seeds are ceased. Right? Okay, so Hopkins translates, he also proves with great effort that when a nirvana is actualized, that would, for the bodhisattva, that would be at the beginning of the 8th bhumi, right? Don, what do you think? The bodhisattva, when does a bodhisattva achieve a nirvana?
Not the nirvana of the Shravaka or Kritika Buddha, but you could say the nirvana of Buddhahood, I guess.
Well, even before the nirvana, even before you could say Hari Nirvana or some other kind of nirvana, even on the 8th bhumi, in that meditative equipoise, the bodhisattva has achieved the cessation of the subtle afflictions. And there are no other afflictions that have not been ceased. There's a cessation of all of the klesha and their seeds. So that is called Mahayana Nirvana. So that takes place even before Buddhahood. You could call Buddhahood also Nirvana, but this is that Mahayana Nirvana takes place, let's say, on the beginning of the 8th bhumi. Okay, so he also proves with great effort that when a nirvana is actualized, one must cognize the meaning of suchness directly, because that's a cessation, and we just proved also that when cessations are ultimate truths, so they're only perceived when you're realizing emptiness or suchness directly. Therefore, those who argue that actually Chandrakirti is saying that true cessations are conventional truths have not come to the right decision. That's how Jeffrey is translating that. So what Chandrakirti's system is that true cessations are ultimate truths. They are not conventional truths. Jimpa translates it a little bit differently there. He says, furthermore, Chandrakirti repeatedly endeavors. Let me just see what the Tibetan is there. He says, whereas Hopkins says he proves with great effort. So the great effort, I think, is what Jimpa is translating as endeavors. That when a nirvana is actualized, one must cognize the meaning of suchness directly. So that means for some Khapa, for what we're talking about, Chandrakirti, for Chandrakirti, nirvanas are ultimate truths. They're not conventional truths. So cessations are ultimate truths. True cessations are ultimate truths. And nirvana which is a kind of true cessation, right? It's the final true cessation, ultimate true cessation. That is also an ultimate truth. So anyone who thinks it is a conventional truth has not understood correctly. So Jimpa says, therefore, to speak of the truth of cessation as a conventional truth would indicate an incomplete analysis. Or as Jeffrey said, therefore, those who propound, according to Chandrakirti, true cessations are conventional truths have not come to the right decision. Chandrakirti does not say that nirvanas are conventional truths. Paul.
Just a small point, Venerable George. In the Vaibhashika system, isn't cessation an ultimate truth as well? Isn't it one of the 75 dharmas?
So according to Vaibhashika, when we talk about conventional truths and ultimate truths, according to Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, they have kind of completely different meanings. They're not talking about ultimate truths are those things that exist the way that they appear.
Right.
For Vaibhashika, ultimate truths are what?
Well, they're the 75 dharmas, right? Which include the 2 types of cessations, aren't they?
75 dharmas. I'm coming up with a blank.
The abhidharmas of just like, so you've got analytical and non-analytical cessation, trying a blank, sorry.
Yeah.
Just when for Vaibhashika, what truly exists, what are ultimate truths, are the constituents, right? The 75 dharmas. Right.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying it means impermanent phenomena.
Exactly.
It's 75 does impermanent phenomena. So according to Vaibhashika, ultimate truths are partless particles.
Right.
And partless moments of consciousness, right? They're things that cannot be broken up into anything else. So that's what they mean by ultimate truths. Like in the final analysis, maybe, someone with where's Minto? And Minto's still there, sort of, MIT physicist or something would say that the ultimate building blocks, maybe this was a 1900 physicist, the ultimate building blocks of things are atoms, right?
Right.
Even smaller than the molecules. And maybe you would go further and say the ultimate building blocks, ultimates are electrons, neutrons, and protons, or something like that. Nowadays, we would say those aren't even ultimate. They have parts and so forth. So that's kind of what the Vaibhashika is saying, that ultimate truths are things that can't be reduced. Anything else is a conventional truth because it can be broken up into parts, either physically, like breaking the vase with a hammer, or analyzing it with your mind into its constituent parts. Whereas partless particles and of matter and partless moments of consciousness can't be subdivided. That's completely different meaning of ultimate truth. So if you have a chance to go back, and those of you who have studied tenets or have the books and you haven't quite studied it yet, go back into the sections of the like in the various presentation of tenets in the Buddhist, the Tibetan system. When we talk about the Vaibhashika, there's always a section, presentation of conventional truth and ultimate truth. Then for Sautrantika, what the presentation of conventional truth and ultimate truth is. So all of them are different. They don't say what ultimate truth is in the same way. Shankar, what do you think?
So, okay, so let's say I'm a Vaibhashika, right?
Yeah.
I'm in the 2nd century or 3rd century Nalanda. I'm a total Vaibhashika, right?
Third,
And
2nd century Nalanda. I don't think Nalanda was existing in the 2nd century.
okay, fine. 5th century Vaibhashika in Nalanda, right? So I didn't know. When did Nalanda start then?
When did what?
When did Nalanda start then? Because anyway, that's another. Anyway,
Yeah,
I'll just.
yeah, right.
So let's say I'm a Vaibhashika, and I posit that the partless particles and smallest moments of consciousness are the only things that are ultimate truth, right?
Yeah.
So then you ask me the question. You travel back in time and ask me the question: that is nirvana an ultimate truth, right?
Yeah.
And to me, I can't. Can I break into parts nirvana? I can't, right? So
what do they mean by nirvana? So this is all of this is gets back to the things that we talked about in the past, and you.
Okay, I'll go back to my.
Wait. Just so we talked about nirvana is nirvana with remainder,
right,
and nirvana without remainder.
Without remainder, yes.
Right. So
right.
Nirvana with remainder means
Is
that in the sense that the delusions, the klesha, are ceased, but you still have a remainder of contaminated aggregates, right?
right.
Nirvana without remainder means the continuation of that. The klesha are still ceased, so it's kind of nirvana, but you no longer have a remainder of the contaminated aggregates. That means from one point of view, you are snuffed out.
Right, you cease to
From
exist.
from the Vaibhashika point of view, there's no one there to experience the nirvana without remainder. This
Correct.
came up several times in the previous chapters.
Right.
So when we talked about the meaning of exhaustion in the Hinayana sutras and so forth, it's very interesting, a little bit complicated. So for them, you can't really talk about nirvana without remainder. What is nirvana without remainder? Is it something that is knowable?
Yeah.
It can't be known by that person who achieves it. It's only posited by someone else. Like I say, oh, Shankar achieved nirvana without remainder now because he achieved nirvana. He was an arhat, and now he's died. And so you can't even say his continuum has achieved that. You just say that's an example of nirvana without remainder, but you can't even point it out. So it's when you're talking about the meaning of nirvana in the lower schools, you have to go back and look at what they believe that to be.
Right, right. I
So
remember
Venerable
now.
George. So
Yeah.
so you would say then that in Vaibhashika, the cessations are ultimate truths, but nirvana is not among that list. Is that correct? Is that how you're phrasing it? Since if the cessations are in the list of 75 abhidharmas, right? And they are ultimate truths, but that's not the same as nirvana, right? Because it's a cessation, but it's not actually the object that you're meditating on, which is selfless.
No, there are nirvanas. Let's say so it's very complicated when you try.
Sorry, I should have never even brought it up.
No, that's okay. It's if you talk about the Vaibhashika, you have to start from their, what their tenets are. So for them, the only things that are ultimate truths are partless particles,
Right.
and partless moments of consciousness, because they can't be divided up. So
Right.
I don't think they would say that cessations are ultimate truths in that sense. It may be the Sautrantikas will. So anyway, right now,
Okay.
in order to say, for instance, I've mentioned before, I remember Geshe Jumpa Gyatso when I studied with him so many years. He used to, because he was a Larampa Geshe of the old school. That means they had to, after some of their class members got the lower Geshe degrees, there would still be some classes that those that wanted to get the Larampa degree, the highest of the Geshe degrees, they would continue studying for another 4 or 6 years. And during that time, they would study Abhidharma Kosha and Vinaya. And Geshe Jumpa Gyatso would say they would debate amongst one another, having studied everything from the Prajnaparamita Sutras, usually from the point of view of Svatantrika, right? Like at Sarajay and Drebung and Ganden, what they call Parchin, the perfections. They study it from the point of view of Maitreya's text, talking about the Svatantrika point of view. Then they study Umala Jukpa, they study Madhyamaka Vatara, and then later, maybe in the Larampa class, they study Gompa Rapsel. So what we're studying is kind of like the Larampa classes. They go into more detail about all these things. And then they would debate one another from the point of view of Vaibhashika this, Sautrantika that, Chittamatra this. So all of it requires kind of like an encyclopedic understanding of the tenets that they had developed through all of those studies, but particularly in the Larampa class, studying the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika, not just from a tenets class, but from studying Abhidharma Kosha itself. So that's something that some of you who studied these things before have leisure to do now. You can go back and analyze these things as they're being presented by the Prasangika. You can go back and see how that understanding, let's say, interaction between your Prasangika mind and your Vaibhashika mind. But when you talk about your Vaibhashika mind or another person you're debating with who's holding the Vaibhashika position, you have to understand what they mean by conventional truth and ultimate truth. It might be completely different than what you mean by conventional truth and ultimate truth. So, William, what are you thinking?
I was thinking about the object of negation when you directly realize emptiness. It seems to me that inherent existence is the object of negation when you realize emptiness. And therefore, there is no other conceptualization connected with it. In this system of 10 bhumis, even though you have correctly realized emptiness on the first bhumi and this is the question about the object of negation, with inherent existence, not the inherent existence of something, but inherent existence itself as the object of negation, that
Oh, you always have inherent existence of something. You can't just have inherent existence as a concept, because otherwise, if you could, then inherent existence would inherently exist. It's always the inherent existence of something that you're contemplating. So you meditate on the lack of inherent existence of the Four Noble Truths, for instance. They are the substratum there that you're meditating on.
I guess I'm rather than assuming that the thing that you are looking for in this meditation is inherent existence. In other words, it could be the inherent existence of anything, everything, but you are looking for inherent existence. And when you realize the non-existence of that, then you have directly realized the emptiness of inherent existence.
Not necessarily directly, it can be directly, but you can realize that conceptually, right?
Yes, but I'm talking about the experience of non-conceptual realization, which is the prerequisite to the first bhumi.
Okay, yeah, very well. Yeah, it's coincident with, yeah. It doesn't not a prerequisite. When you realize it directly, you are on the first bhumi.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like you realize it and then you're on the first bhumi. It's not like a prerequisite would mean before you got something, you had to have the prerequisite. So it's a requisite or coincident with the achievement of the first bhumi. Okay.
Very well.
So it's object.
So there's only one. So the point is, there's only one experience. This is that experience. And that experience is the state into which you enter at every point along the bhumis in order to rewash the cloth, to purify it more and more and more. You purify it with that same direct realization of emptiness, that non-conceptuality which you realized coincidentally with the first bhumi. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you're getting at, but I think that's correct. You are transitioning from one bhumi to the next when that meditative equipoise on emptiness has become empowered through your collection of merit that you've achieved since the last transition. Because each time you're transitioning from one bhumi to the other, something has changed in your experience, right? You've accumulated more merit. You have, and you're analyzing emptiness now with this consciousness, which is empowered by a previous collection of wisdom, that is your previous experiences of direct realization of emptiness. You're realizing the same emptiness, but now your mind is empowered to cease, to cause cessation or abandonment of certain afflictions that you didn't quite have the power to eliminate before. Like my example of the pot, with the potatoes stuck inside. At the path of seeing, you take out the things that you can see, and then later you use the how do you say, the different kinds of implements and soaps and scouring powders and so forth to eliminate more and more subtle things. You're still doing that cleaning in that meditative equipoise. But there are other times when you are in meditative equipoise, let's say on the second, third, fourth, fifth bhumi, something, you're in meditative equipoise on emptiness, but you are not at that point creating some, you're not experiencing the true cessation of something. You can have meditative equipoise when you are not actively abandoning any delusions at that point. When the mind has become empowered to abandon something more subtle, it's at that point you're experiencing having a realization of a true cessation. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Rocio, what are you thinking? You're looking a little bit.
Well, I'm lost, and I just think how fortunate I am here, and that hopefully, one day I will understand this.
Oh, okay. So why are you lost? Where are you lost?
Well, I had a question that, but it was very elemental.
Good. Okay, we need that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying, does this, when emptiness, is realized, you said that it was when emptiness is realized, you said that it was not ultimate, like inherently existent. Why is, emptiness not inherently existent?
So first of all, nothing inherently exists. What would be the quality of something be if it were inherently existent? That would mean that that phenomenon existed without the need, it existed from its own side without being labeled. It would be something which would not depend on anything else. So it couldn't change. It would be permanent. So when we get into the 6th chapter, when we talk about this hypothetical thing, inherent existence, why is it even brought up? It's not like some philosophical concept. It's the way that we naturally believe phenomena to exist. They're out there, findable within their parts. They're existing from their own side. That means without me having to perceive the basis of designation, like without me perceiving the parts of the car still exists there somehow from its own side. It has a self-existence, a true existence, an inherent existence. So the understanding of that is something that, even though you read about it at the beginning, you have to sort of hear about it again and again and investigate it, just as we're doing now. We're just at the beginning of our investigation of this, because the 6th Bhumi, when we're going to talk about the perfection of wisdom, that's where all of the logic comes in, talking about how to prove that phenomena are not inherently existent. Why do we have to do that? It's not as though someone, has written books that phenomena inherently exist, and we've come to believe that, and that has to be refuted. It's that's how they appear to us. That's how our mind believes them to exist. So to identify the object of negation, getting back to what William was talking about before, we have to, with a very calm mind, so that requires calm abiding, tranquil abiding, shine or shamatha, along with the ability to analyze within that calm mind, which is what we call vipassana, penetrative insight. We have to identify in our own mind something that's very intimate to us, our own identity. I, Rocio, we try to identify how that is appearing to my mind, in one sense, how it's appearing, and whether my mind is believing that appearance or not. It's that point that's called the identification of the object of negation. It's very difficult to do. We can talk about it as though something, oh yeah, it's obvious. But in actual meditation, sometimes you have to inculcate that, it says stimulate that sense of I by saying to yourself, oh, my brother said I was a jerk, or my brother said I was a thief. Rocio, do you have brothers? Do you have any brothers?
No, but I have a teenager son that is worse than that.
Okay, so the teenage son. Okay, so mom, I won't even use some of the words you can imagine when I say, and at that point, you can use that in your meditation to identify the object of negation. What is the object of negation? Inherently existent Rocio. So there is within your mind a sense of your own being, Rocio, that seems to be not dependent on your body and mind. It's something that's existing there by itself, independent, inherently existent. Say, for instance, if someone says, you're a thief, you don't think my body is a thief. You don't think my mind is a thief. You think that something other than your body and mind, is a thief. When we go through this in the 6th chapter and in other tenets, it sometimes says there's no apprehension of the innate object of negation that doesn't appear without the aggregates. But that's not exactly right. You have an appearance of inherently existent self to the mind. I say appearance to it. Someone want to say something? Okay, so there in your mind, there's an experience. We can call it an appearance of the I that seems to be existing from its own side, independent of anything else. It's sort of appearing in our mind. And there's also our reaction to that appearance. Like the example I've given so many times of William walking down the steps dressed as Santa Claus. There's the appearance of Santa Claus. To the children, they believe that. To the adults, they know that's Bill, that's William. So you have to see in your own mind, are you like an adult, like an Arya being, and sees that appearance of the inherently existent I and says, that's just an illusion. That's just an appearance to my mind. It doesn't exist that way. Or are you like ordinary beings like us, and we believe that? Yeah, I exist. They shouldn't criticize me. I'm getting angry. Or that ice cream does exist. I, inherently existent Rocio, wants that inherently existent ice cream. Are we like the Arya being? We're like the childs. We're like the children or the naive ones who believe that appearance. So that inherent existence is something that we suppose. The things appear to be inherently existent. They appear to be that. And the fact that we believe that means that we are grasping at something that doesn't really exist. We are, so inherent existence doesn't really exist. What does exist is the appearance of inherent existence. Why does it appear? Because of our familiarization since beginningless time within cyclic existence. We've left imprints in our mind to accede to that appearance. Accede means to go along with, to grasp at that as true, to believe that. We've grown accustomed to that. And those appearances to ordinary beings, all conventional phenomena, appear to be inherently existent. So,
and then that's when, you know, when you realize the grasping of this, you know, inherent existence, then that's when it says that the meditation, like the antidote is just to let it go. Like,
no, not to let it go. That's not really meditation on emptiness. That would just be like ignoring it, or just believing someone that says it doesn't exist, don't worry about it. You know, like when you're a kid and you were worried that the boogeyman was coming when the floor was creaking, or the dogs were barking outside, or the shutters were, you know, banging in the windows, and someone told you, don't worry, there's no boogeyman. You're still believing it. It's not, you know, you have to prove to yourself that the boogeyman doesn't exist. You have to prove to yourself that this appearance of true existence does not accord with how it actually exists. And how do you prove that? Through the logic of, let's say, for instance, that if Rossio existed as it appears, as inherently existent, it would have to be, Rossio would have to be inherently one with her aggregates, you know, if you're talking about yourself, I, Rossio, would have to be inherently one with my aggregates, my 5 aggregates, or would have to be different than the aggregates. So when we gave a course before this course on the wisdom chapter of the sacred words of Manjushri, it was called The Practice of Emptiness. We spent a lot of time on recognizing the object of negation. So, and then after that, once you've recognized that, you know, how the Rossio is appearing, you have to come to a certain kind of recognition. If it existed that way, it would either have to be identical to the aggregates or different than the aggregates. This is one particular logic. There are other logics also, but this particular one. Why is that? You have to check. If 2 things exist, they either have to be identical or different. Is there any other choice? Let's say you have, you're just thinking about 2 different things. You haven't, maybe you're seeing one of them, and one of them you're thinking, is it that? They either have to be identical or different. Let's say a glass of milk, is that identical to a mug of beer, or is it different than a mug of beer? Different, right? Is a glass of milk identical to a glass of chocolate milk? No, they're different. Even if they're different a little, they're different. There's those only 2 choices. So you have to go through a process like this of enabling your mind with some prior realizations that if 2 things exist, they either have to be identical or different. So you can take your aggregates, they do exist conventionally. And then you take the Rossio, that's the hypothetical thing that's appearing to your mind. You're saying, if Rossio exists, Rossio either has to be identical to her aggregates or different. It's like comparing a glass of milk with a glass of milk. Glass of milk is identical to a glass of milk, right? So when you analyze in that way with various reasonings, you can come to the conclusion in your own mind, in that calm mind, shamatha, calm abiding, where you're analyzing with vipassana. This is called ultimate analysis. You're seeing whether the Rossio that you're imagining you come to the conclusion that it does not exist the way that it appears. It is not one with the aggregates. It is not different than the aggregates. And the presupposition before was, if it exists, it has to be one or the other. So because it is not one and not the other, therefore it doesn't exist. So at that point, in that meditative equipoise, there's kind of like that light bulb turns on, you say, it doesn't exist. And you have a sense then of a mere vacuity. That which you were previously believing was out there existing, suddenly you realize doesn't exist at all. That's analogy, that's analogous to that, when you have that kind of aha moment, that's analogous to that realization of emptiness. Now that can take place conceptually. It needs to take place conceptually. First of all, you have to think about it, first of all, and then later, when you, having meditated on it again and again and accumulated merit, you can eventually have a direct realization of that emptiness. Okay. Okay, I hope that helps a little. You think about that, yeah. Mintu, you're saving your bandwidth. You don't want us to, okay, go on.
Yeah, very much. I have a quick question. So I guess
you have a good question, did you say, or you have a question?
I have questions.
Okay, I thought you were already qualifying it as a good question. Okay.
No, I have a question. So I guess we're talking about like how phenomena doesn't exist for their own sign, and they don't have an intrinsic existence. Like, this piece, for example, right?
Yeah.
So this piece doesn't have an intrinsic existence. This is changing moment to moment.
What is that? What is that? A chess piece or what is it?
It's a chess piece.
Oh, chess piece. Okay.
Yeah. So, but then the fact that it still have a shapes right now, and this shape is
what? What was that word?
Basically, it had a shape right now. It is stable, and it's function in some way according to the law of physics, for example. So that's why my mind think that this thing, even though it's sort of changeable, it still has like an existence somewhere, because it still function, it still works.
Right.
And similarly, our mind, right, even though it's changing from moment to moment, the fact that my mind continues to function in some way, like hold together from lifetime to lifetime, it must imply that there's some sort of identity that persisting through lifetime to lifetime.
It must be some kind of what?
Identity, right? There must be some sort of identity that persists from lifetime to lifetime. Like my mind doesn't become the mind of the Dalai Lama, for example, or the mind of like a random person. So there must be some sort of identity-ness that sort of persists with my mind from lifetime to lifetime.
Identityness. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what you're. So we get into danger here. Use these words kind of casually, because identityness almost sounds like there's this, like we talk about inherent existence. So phenomena appear to our mind due to karma. Our consciousness, what appears to our mind, the vessel world, like in Abhidharmakosha, it says, the vessel world, that means the environment, everything that we experience about it, and the beings therein. So the vessel world would mean say non-sentient beings, the trees and the rocks and the earth and the stars and everything, and the beings therein, that means the sentient beings, they all arise due to karma. So our appearance of the appearance to your mind of that chess piece, what was that, a king, by the way?
I think it's a rook.
Oh, it's a rook. Okay, it's pretty big.
It's a Viking piece, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was a Thai piece or something. Okay, so that appears to your mind because you've created, I want to say, sentient beings in general have created the collective karma of having the appearance of atoms in this world system, and that piece is comprised of various kinds of atoms, whether it be ivory or some kind of plastic or some other kind of substance or bone or something. That has its own evolution, karmic evolution. To the Buddhas, if the Buddha were to perceive the situation right now, if the Buddha were to be in your room with you, and you were just hanging out with the Buddha, and you're saying, Buddha, did you see this piece? The Buddha would see that piece in the sense that he knows your mind and how it appears to you. But that rook, that piece, would not appear from its own side to the Buddha as existing the way that it appears to you. That has no inherent appearance to someone else. To a spirit, it might appear to be something else. It might appear frightful. It might appear to your dog or your cat. It might appear to them as different. Generally, it would have the same kind of shape, but there is no inherent existence of that. Why do things appear to us? Because of the collective karma of all sentient beings that have given rise to this particular evolution of this universe, and to our individual karma. Like, say, for instance, you may like chocolate ice cream. It appears to you as someone else as ice cream, but they don't have the same experience when it touches their taste buds and so forth. That's kind of your individual karma. Or like, say, for instance, preta, a glass of water, a preta, that particular dependent arising, when they perceive that, that appears to be pus and blood. When a deva being, due to their individual karma, they still perceive something there due to that dependent arising, but it appears to be ambrosia or nectar. When a human perceives it, it appears to be the liquid we call water, and it's okay if it's not polluted. So there's a combination of collective and individual karma that give rise to the dependent origination of the universe. What is actually, sort of causally taking place. Stars collide and create larger stars or whatever, the things that are happening. They are perceived in different ways depending on the combination of the collective and individual karma of individuals. But whatever way it appears to them, it always appears to be inherently existing from its own side. When the Buddha perceives what you are perceiving by knowing your mind, he recognizes how that appearance is occurring to your mind because of your own particular afflictions, the combination of, collective karma and individual karma. And he also recognizes how your mind, how it appears to your mind as inherently existent. And he also realizes how your mind is grasping to that, believing that that's inherently existent. But to the Buddha's mind himself, if the Buddha, directs their mind to that chess piece, there is no appearance there that you imagine it has. It doesn't appear at all like that. That appearance is only due to the fact that you are a sentient being who have not eliminated the obstructions to omniscience. When you've eliminated the obstructions to omniscience, the phenomena no longer appear at all like that from their own side. The Buddha knows what you're talking about because he knows your mind. He knows how all of the world appears to all sentient beings. So the Buddha can be in the conversation. You can ask him, what about this Buddha? What about this chess piece? And the Buddha can say, he can understand what you're talking about, what you're referring to, but not because it appears to him or her from its own side.
I see. I guess a mind like that, being able to perceive all things at once it's very chaotic. It's unimaginable for us.
Yeah. Some people might think they can imagine it. Oh yeah, that's simple. Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of like amazing. Okay, so how are we doing, Shankar? What do you think?
So the phrase identityness, it reminded me of a question that I was at Geshe Sherab's class, like, I don't know, a few days ago, and this came up and I never got to ask him. So, the famous, the debate that, with Nagarjuna talks about where, about cause and effect, right? So if someone can ask, so how can the identityness of a seed or if you have a seed that grows into an oak tree, for example, there must be something about the oakness that's already existing in the cause, right? There's something about the effect must be in the cause, because otherwise the seed could grow into a birch tree or something, right? There must be something. What was the argument that was used to refute that there is no effect built into the cause already, right?
Well, there's the potential, but it's not as though, the argument, when we talk about, and this will be one of the arguments that we talked about in the 6th chapter, in fundamental wisdom, the very first verses by Nagarjuna, right, is explaining, one of the fundamental reasonings. So and just talking to Rocio a couple of minutes ago, we were talking about the self is not identical to the aggregates and not different than the aggregates. But when you add the word inherent, it's not inherently one with the aggregates and not inherently different than the aggregates. That was one logic that's used to realize the emptiness of that, right? That the Rocio does not inherently exist. Another argument is one of talking about how something is produced. And so rather than talking about Rocio, we can use a sprout. How is a sprout produced? It's produced from, conventionally we say it's produced from its seed, right? So if it's produced from its seed inherently, that's the important word here all the time, because ordinary people, everything that appears to ordinary sentient beings appears to be inherently existent. And all of the things that we contemplate, like processes, like the process of birth or generation, all is conceived to be inherently existent. Okay, so that's the basis. So our phenomena, are they born from themselves? That is, that presupposes that the sprout is born inherently from the seed, which is itself. Is it born from something different? That means the seed is inherently different than the sprout. Is it born from a seed which is both the same and different than this? Is the sprout born from the seed which is both inherently the same and different than the sprout? Or is it born without cause at all? Those are the four alternatives. So in refuting that those are the only four ways it could be born. If something was inherently born, or inherently produced, whatever word you want to use to translate the Tibetan, the Kewa, we say, generated or born. Is it born from itself? That would mean that the sprout already exists in the seed. Now, you might want to, you go back to your biology lab or botany lab, and with a seed like a lima bean that is going to become a lima sprout. If at a certain point when it's been moistened, if you separate the skin, you can see the proto sprout already in there. That's kind of the genesis for thinking the sprout already exists in the seed, right? But before that, before it was moistened with water and heated, it didn't have that microbial or that small kind of proto sprout within it. It was just something that was dry and so forth. So anyway, those are the logics that will be talked about in that case. So that if something were born from itself, it would not have to be produced at all because it would already exist. That's one of there are many, many logics that can be used to refute self-generation, that is, generation from self. That means, like, say, for instance, if Shanka of one moment, and compare that with Shanka of the next moment, right? The Shanka of the second moment, who is the continuation of the first moment, has arisen from its cause, Shanka of the previous moment, right? And let's say the Shanka of noon gives rise to the Shanka of 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Afternoon. So did the Shanka of 1 o'clock in the afternoon, did it inherently arise from the Shanka of 12 noon? You might say, why are you adding the word inherently? Because all of our perceptions, everything that appears to us appears to be inherently existent. All of the processes that we contemplate, like arising, that's a process, right? Like walking. Those are processes. You can't really, you can kind of imagine walking. You can imagine the process. They all appear to be inherently existent. So if Shanka is inherently existent, he would have to be inherently produced from the previous Shanka. So there are only 4 possibilities. He's inherently produced from the Shanka, which is inherently the same as himself at 1 o'clock, or inherently different, or both inherently the same and inherently different, or without any cause at all. So maybe just hearing these words now will leave a little bit of sort of imprint in mind, because in the 6th chapter, this is where the main argument that Nagarjuna uses is this particular logic. Generation from the 4 extremes. Okay.
So the follow-up, so my question, so I understand that those arguments, those 4 famous, the 4 famous, what do you call it, the arguments. But then somebody can ask, like, this is like, a proponent of inherent existence can ask, well, something about Shanka at 1 o'clock must be there at Shanka at 12 o'clock, because otherwise George at 1 o'clock could appear from Shanka at 12 o'clock.
Right.
So what was the argument what is the argument against that? You know what I'm saying? That Shanka, that there's a continuum, like a sprout grows into a.
Let's leave that.
Okay.
Let's
Right.
leave
Okay.
that. Let's
Fine.
leave that till, because we're going to be talking about that in detail in the 6th chapter.
Okay,
But
got it.
good that you brought it up now to sort of like to prime the pump, okay? So before Minto, I just want to check, anyone else have a question? John, Nadine, Don, Diana. Is Diana still here?
Yeah.
There, yeah, both Dianas are here, okay. Snehi, Paul, anyone? Ron? I'm just giving them a chance, Minto, because you've had a couple of questions. I just so that they're not bullied out. Richard, you have something?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
Getting back to the text, Jimpa summarizes this paragraph in footnote 280. And he says, Tsongkhapa's point here is that for Chandrakirti, cessation must be ultimate truth because it is known by the wisdom directly realizing emptiness within the Arya's meditative equipoise. And I was wondering if that summary is accurate, if you believe that that's accurate, or whether or not anything's been left out.
Yeah, that's the same as what we've been saying. Because the Arya being, that means someone who is now had direct realization of emptiness, right? They experience that cessation. They know that cessation, not in post-meditation. They know that cessation in the meditative equipoise that realizes emptiness. So therefore, that cessation itself must be emptiness, must be an ultimate truth. Because the only thing that appears to the meditative equipoise of the Arya, meditating on emptiness, the only thing that appears to them is emptiness, ultimate truth. There's no conventional truth that's appearing to their mind. So if cessation is perceived in that meditative equipoise, that would mean that cessation has to be an ultimate truth, has to be an emptiness. Okay? Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. Pranav, you've been silent. Do you have any questions?
No, Venerable. I was just listening and trying to understand.
Do you have the textbooks that we've been reading?
I do.
Okay, good.
Got it.
Okay, good, excellent. Just checking. Okay, Mintu, you're the last. What do they say? Last call for alcohol.
Yeah, I have a good question. So I guess so basically we discussed that our mind doesn't have an intrinsic existence, right?
Right.
And it doesn't have like identityness, egolessness.
Doesn't have what?
It doesn't have like a self. It doesn't have an intrinsic existence.
It doesn't have an inherent, or you can translate inherent existence as intrinsic. I understand that, but then you were saying it doesn't have a self. It does have a self.
It doesn't have an ultimate self. It doesn't have a conventional self.
It does have a conventional self.
Yeah, and our grasping is our ignorance is also dependently originated. That's why we can remove it, or get rid of it, right?
That's one of the reasons, right? It's a dependent origination.
Yeah.
It is not inherently existent.
Yeah.
It occurs within the mind, which has the conventional clear light nature, which means it is not inherently stained by the delusions. All of those factors are involved. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my question is that, like, we are doing a lot of this operation of elimination very slowly. Like, I had to meditate, I had to get rid of it myself. I had to meditate, I had to get rid of it myself.
Well, I'm not following what you're saying. Just say it a little slower. Move your
I'm saying
lips a little
that
bit more.
we are doing this process of elimination very slowly.
Which process of elimination?
Like meditating on emptiness.
Okay, yeah, right.
Very slowly to remove it one by one, bit by bit at time. My question is that why can't we, let's say we have faith in Buddha. Why can't we pray to Buddha? Buddha sort of nuclear bomb it. So get rid of all of my affliction like, all at once, because they are, my affliction is grasping is not mine, so they can
so for
nuclear
instance,
bomb it.
So for instance, you'd like to have the ability to be on the beginning, the meditative equipoise on the 8th bhumi. You'd like that to, why can't I have that right now? Just when I'm leaving the path of preparation in that meditative equipoise, when I have my first realization of emptiness, why can't that perform what the 8th bhumi does? Because you don't have the accumulation of merit for the main thing. And your wisdom, although it realizes emptiness directly, doesn't have the same strength as that wisdom of the 8th bhumi bodhisattva. So the combination of those two things have to be brought about sequentially. That's why the Buddha, the bodhisattva, in between meditative sessions on emptiness, the bodhisattva practices the 6 perfections. They practice generosity. They go to the pure realms and serve the Buddhas there. They serve their gurus in this lifetime, like the story of the ever crying bodhisattva in the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Even when his guru was in meditation retreat, long retreat, he swept outside, and he even took his blood from his veins to put on the ground so the dust didn't come in the air. You have to accumulate merit in various ways, and that's one of the strongest ways. Like when I was in Dharamsala, when I was studying at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, Geshe Narwan Darge was my teacher, and I asked Geshe-la permission. Could I'm a monk, and I'm not supposed to take out things from the ground, pull up plants and so forth, but your backyard, Geshe-la, is full of all of this junk and garbage, and could I clean it up? Would you give me permission? And he said, yes, good. So kind of like that, uprooting these things and cleaning for the sake of the guru creates incredible merit. So these are the kinds of things that the bodhisattvas do. They practice generosity, which includes these kinds of chores. They practice ethics, avoiding negative karma. They practice patience. They practice enthusiastic perseverance. They practice concentration and wisdom in order to accumulate merit. So generally of those perfections, the ones that are most obvious are like generosity. So that's like when we do puja, there's so many different offerings that are made, offerings of flower and incense and light and so forth. We offer to the Buddhas in order to accumulate merit. But there are other ways of accumulating merit. Practicing guru devotion in action and so forth. And so that's why right at the beginning, you can't ask the Buddha to send you a nuclear bomb so that you can get rid of all of the delusions in one fell swoop. That's a short story. Okay. So, yeah. Okay, Shankar, you have one last thought.
Yeah, not a question, a comment, because we were talking about the shape and of the chess piece and so on, and it doesn't appear inherently like that to the Buddha, right? As it appears to us.
Right.
I remembered that a few weeks ago, physicists have now gotten empirical or experimental evidence of us being pervaded by gravitational waves. So which means that if the gravitational waves, time and space is continually, right now, my shape is actually not what it is, right? Because there's the gravitational wave going through me. And so my shape is changing, and the the moments of consciousness are also changing, right?
Okay. Okay. Good observation.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess the Buddha can see that.
The Buddha, yeah, the Buddha knows everything. Okay. So just a reminder, there won't be a discussion on Monday. I have a doctor's appointment. I'll see you next Saturday. We're going to do some dedication prayers and the prayer for the quick recognition of the reincarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche as a dedication. So Sheila, you'll put those up. So yeah, so we don't usually do the short mandala offering now. We just go to the dedication. Okay. So this conventional dedication, right? As we talked about before. So that means recognizing that we've created virtuous karma, as we did today. And not only the karma that we created today, we can dedicate again and again the karmic seeds that we've left from previous virtuous actions in the past, those that we've created today, and those that even those in anticipation, those in the future, we can dedicate them. Due to these virtues, Gewadi, may I quickly attain the state of being a Guru Buddha, and as a result of that, lead all living beings, all migrators, without exception. That means even the enemies, even the strangers, not just those you like, lead them into that enlightened state. That's our main dedication. And then, although this is a prayer, we can use it as a dedication. This is from the prayer of Maitreya. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen yet, which we could eventually generate, may it arise and grow, and may that which has arisen already, may we not lose that, may that not diminish, but increase more and more. So if, as you're familiar, when we talked about the 37, what do we call it? The 37 wings or the 37 facets of enlightenment, we talked about the four, certain abandonments, which could be also translated as the four special practices. Here, we're talking about the development. So that means may that which is not yet there, may it arise and grow, and may that which is already there not diminish but grow evermore. And then the long life prayer for our gurus, such as the Dalai Lama. So if you have a chance to hear the Dalai Lama tonight on YouTube, it'll be live broadcasts, his Avalokiteshvara empowerment. You, holy gurus, who are my eyes to view all the infinite scriptures, you are the supreme gateway for we fortunate ones traveling to liberation. You engage with us with skillful means, with upaya, skill and means, motivated out of loving kindness. All illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. And then the prayer for Lama Zopa's reincarnation to quickly be recognized. Although this is a prayer, we can use it as a dedication. Prayer in general, dedication, you can go to the text. The dedication in general is a kind of prayer. Prayers are things that we just wish will happen in the future. Dedications are like putting your money where your mouth is, right? Due to these, I'm going to create the merit. These merits that I've created, may they bring about that which I'm praying for. Peerless teacher and assembly of the bodhisattvas, the children of the conquerors, you Shravakas that exist in Pratika Buddhas, the conqueror, the already omniscient Losang Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa. You are the spiritual father to your sons, spiritual sons, as well as the lineage masters of the Galupa, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms. Please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. You who upheld and spread Shakyamuni's precious and complete teachings, both through explanation and practice. You wore the armor of patience, which was your name, Sopa, that was never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake both of the conqueror's teachings, the Buddhist teachings, which is the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and as well as striving for single-pointedly for the sake of mother sentient beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You passed into nirvana. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the fact that the oceanic blessings of the three jewels, the triple gem, is undeceiving, and the great waves of bodhicitta, of the children of the conquerors, the bodhisattvas, due to that, may the smile of the reincarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. So then think that after that various conventional dedications, seal those dedications in the emptiness of the three spheres. The merits that we're dedicating do not inherently exist. Although they can be conceptualized by our mind, we recognize conventionally we have created some virtuous karma. They can't be found. They're merely imputed. The process of dedicating, which includes myself as the dedicator and the action of dedicating, they do not inherently exist. And the goals dedicated to enlightenment, quick reincarnation, identification of the reincarnation of Lama Zopa and so forth, they do not inherently exist. All three spheres are empty of inherent existence. This helps to protect those merits that we've dedicated from being destroyed even by anger and wrong view and abandoning the Dharma and so forth, criticizing bodhisattvas. So thank you very much for your attendance, your patience. Look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Venerable George.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, Sheila.